Well, hey everyone, I'm Corey from the Neuron. Today I'm speaking with Aparna Chennapragada. She is Microsoft's Chief Product Officer of Experiences and Devices. Aparna leads product for some of the most influential tools in the Microsoft ecosystem, from Windows to 365, all the way to Copilot, which we're going to be talking about today. Aparna, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Corey. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks so much. We're really grateful you've joined us. So let's start with the announcement, I guess. Copilot tuning. It's going to allow businesses to train AI using their own data. How does this shift the Copilot value proposition from a more rounded, all-around assistant to more of a domain-specific partner?
Yeah, I mean, look, if I step back and think about like our journey through Copilot, I think of kind of the natural evolution of AI assistants at work, right? At first, what did we do? We said, hey, we'll bring AI to where you work already, right? Bring it to the meetings, bring it to the Teams chat, bring it to Outlook, bring it to Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. And so in some sense, that's been the first wave, and we've already seen people start to use that in ways that are fitting in their workflows. The second wave is how we think about what we're doing right now, is saying, along with that, what is the M365 Copilot as an app that you can go to, right? That's a big deal, as in turn to questions, being able to ask questions, being able to do a whole bunch of things with your digital assistant. And then we started saying, okay, look, that is great as an overall digital assistant that every employee gets. As we started talking to customers, one of the unlocks for us to say, well, it can be even more useful if the assistant knows your business, talks like you do, thinks like you do, and works like you do in terms of your own business. So we've been working on what you mentioned, Copilot tuning. And the idea is powerful, but simple, which is how do we actually start to take all the AI models and intelligence that works and tune it and tailor it to your own business, your own specific set of workflows. A good example is a legal firm where, of course, all legal firms have common set of things that they do, and then that AI can help. But every legal firm is slightly different in terms of how they structure their documents, how they think about the specific domain that they work in, and so on. So that's the big motivation for us with Copilot tuning.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can see where you'd even be able to have your company values instilled in there. You would be able to get into any company style guides, branding guides, and the things that
100%.
make the core of who your business is, not just what it does, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think brand assets is another great example of where every company has a different visual style, a different visual template, the tone, voice, and so on. So we're kind of thinking, how do we make AI work even harder for your business?
That's awesome. So multi-agent orchestration is a major leap too. How do you envision teams of agents changing the way people work in the near term?
This is one where I can go on for many hours, because I think, look, I genuinely, Corey, think that this is one of the we're at the cusp of something really interesting and important happening in terms of how we all as people interact with AI. Again, the first wave was mostly AI coming up as tools. But I think the shift from AI going from a tool to an agent is already happening, right? So we've launched a few agents that internally and externally, like the researcher agent or the analyst agent, where it's basically able to take on high level complex tasks and say, for example, I say, hey, help me prepare for this important customer meeting. And don't just look at what's there on the web, like look at all the CRM data, look at all the emails, the interaction that my colleague had with the CEO like 3 years ago, and just pull all of this together. So as you're seeing AI able to do that, we said, well, in the single player mode, of course, you can interact with the agent, and that's great. But what is the multiplayer mode here, right? Is how I've been talking about it. And there are two aspects here. One is, how do agents talk to each other, right? That's the multi-agent orchestration. For example, we have the researcher agent that can tap into the sales agent and say, okay, for this particular thing, I need the sales agent to do this, support agent to do this, put this all together, right? That's one aspect. The other aspect we're starting to work on is to say, well, how the multiplayer aspect is, how do agents and people work together? And on that front, when you look at it, when you think about it, we have the best place where people are already doing this multiplayer, which is Teams, right?
Yeah.
Today, you and I and a group of people can interact with each other in a company and just have all of the high bandwidth conversations there and get on a meeting, etc. And so what we said is, well, that's the co-working space that will evolve Teams to where agents and humans can work together.
Wow. Yeah, and that's definitely where everything is headed. You can just see it in the business world, even at home in a lot of ways. Something else I wanted to ask about is the agent store now includes Microsoft and third-party agents, which is an interesting step. How are you thinking about that ecosystem in terms of trust and quality control as the store scales up?
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is one where we want to kind of hit the right balance of one, not presume that we'll have this tightly editorial, like top down, there'll be three agents, right? In reality, it's like the app store of this AI era. There will be many agents built by folks that are much closer to the customer workflows, domains, and in fact, talking to customers. They already have like really interesting agents. Some are very narrow and specialized for vendor contract management for this particular use case versus some things are broad, right? Which is, hey, help me write better, right? So there are agents for across the board. So we said, okay, there are three things that we need to solve here. Number one is being able to actually provide a way for these agents to be built easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how can we provide both, and the spectrum of like no code to all the way to like APIs that you can mess around with, right? That's why Microsoft Copilot Studio is a great way to build these agents. In fact, we have 1 million custom agents already built through the Copilot Studio.
Wow.
And then all the way, if you want to go get into the guts of it, you can use Microsoft Foundry and say, build these, like go to the raw APIs of the models and build these agent apps. So that's number one. How do you build these agents? Number two is how do you find them? Right? So that's where the agent store comes in. So as part of M365 Copilot, we have an agent store. And so you can search for it. You can actually see which of these agents are built by Microsoft versus the customer themselves, or even third-party agents and so on. So that's building. Then that's like finding. And then the third is actually using these agents, right? So we have a Copilot control system that every IT admin can use to manage, right? And say, okay, like which of these agents are deployed, which of them are secure and compliant, and make sure that you have kind of a management and control pane on all of that. So it's like a three-pronged solution here.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So is Copilot now such an integrated part of daily workflow apps like Teams, Outlook, Word? Just curious, what kind of patterns or surprises have you seen in how people interact with and use it?
Super interesting. And it's there are a couple things that, in fact, I think that that actually helped shape where we went with M365 Copilot with this launch, where we said, of course, people started using it within the confines of the app, right?
Yeah.
But what we started seeing is people wanted to ask all sorts of questions across their work world as well as the world at large, right? So that's the number one pattern we have seen, which is people really want to ask questions that often can require the AI to reason over the world at large. So for example, if you say, hey, I want to do an analysis on X, Y, and Z company. Now, of course, you have the web has amazing set of information, and so the AI uses that. But what we've done is said, no, actually, we'll want to combine that with the graph and kind of the richness of all of the information that you have about it in the emails, files, meetings, etc. Right? So that's number one. What we've seen is people really do want to kind of have that combination. The second is we're starting to see that chat is fantastic as a way to ask questions and find information, which is why we have the chat as a central point of the M365 Copilot app, as well as search. But what we are seeing is that people want to go beyond that. Meaning, I'll give you an example. When you want to kind of create content, you want to create a poster for a conference within your company, You, of course,
Mhm.
can prompt your way, but then you still want that last mile editing. You don't want to keep telling the model, oh, yeah, change that thing over there on the left and change this thing. And so
Yeah.
what we've built is an ability right within the M365 Copilot, a tool which is an AI editor. If you think about it as a visual editor that can just smartly kind of like, you know, complement the prompt-based generation, right? So
Oh,
that's
wow.
the second one. The idea that, hey, we should go beyond chat because there's only so much telling you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Which leads me to the other observation we've had is that people, when we did the user research, folks started talking about, oh, I do actually want to go back and forth, but sometimes I have a natural boundary of a project. Like I have a business review coming up. I just want AI to hoover up all of the right information for it and then start to kind of get cranking on what I need, like the deck or the information that I need and so on.
Yeah.
So we have a new capability in M365 Copilot. It's very early, called the notebook, right? And this notebook, the idea is simple, again, powerful because, again, it can bring together a whole bunch of work data. Let's say you're working on an important project. You can say, okay, like pull together all the content sources in SharePoint, in OneDrive, in my email, put all of these things together, and then get cooking on kind of like the and use chat to steer what you want in terms of saying, oh, I want to provide come up with the email summary based on this thing, or I want to come up with the 5 important questions that we need to address in this project, and so on and so forth. So
Oh, wow.
pulling back up your question, as you can tell, this you're kind of peering into our roadmap discussions every day. Number one was to say, hey, chat is really powerful in terms of back and forth over work and the world information. Number two, chat is great, but we can do more than that, whether it's creation of content or this idea of notebook for a project. And then number three, I would say the pattern that kind of is most surprising to us and definitely has helped us shape this product, M365 Copilot, is these agents, right?
Yeah.
And the idea that, yes, you have the universal assistant, but people also are starting to turn to these specialized agents. But right now they're strewn everywhere across
Yeah.
it. And so we're thinking about bringing all of this together so that there's one place that you can have the agent store and discover and use it.
Do you see agents as a thing that, more often right now, I hear about them in business use. I hear about them at the corporate level, the enterprise level. Do you see a future where we as individuals have a team of agents that are like, I've got a meeting in 30 minutes, go get all this ready and have it right here for me when I'm done so I can go into this next meeting prepared?
I absolutely think so, Corey. And I think this is actually the promise. And for us, I mean, at Microsoft, there are many, many users of AI, but we've really laser focused on what I call productivity with a capital P, right? And it's
I
this
love that.
idea, and it's this idea of like saying, look, I mean, every employee, if we can get this team of agents, you join a company, you start onboarding. Imagine you get your laptop, you get your badge, but you also get a team of agents, right? And they work for you, right? Which is,
Yeah.
and these can be a researcher, an analyst, a people partner, a project manager. And how do you kind of start to turn to these AI agents that to do first of all, make you more efficient, get the drudgery out, right? You should never have to take notes by hand, right? That's an efficiency thing. But I think it's
Yeah.
also the effectiveness, which is what I'm finding with these AI agents. The researcher agent, for example, that I use every day, is around not just efficiency but effectiveness. So for example, like I'm preparing for my one-on-one with one of my colleagues, and it made connections that I didn't, right? And that's when, to give you a very concrete example, it started to kind of say, well, you should bring up this X, Y, and Z because in the last meeting, you guys kind of touched on it and there was a lot of interest that
Yeah.
your boss showed. So like, come back to that point. So it's not an efficiency alone, it's an effectiveness thing.
That's a great point. And it's a thing we've seen here at the Neuron and with our parent company, even that, the way to look at this is less as a tool that will do what a team of humans did and more as a way for it to almost augment you as a human and find the things that we struggle with. Like we're not going to recognize patterns the way AI is going to recognize patterns. And it really seems to as a tool to augment a human. It can downright be a superpower in your pocket.
100%. I mean, this is you speak my language, which is, in fact, I've been talking about it even internally with the teams and externally, that the famous quote of I think it was Jobs, who said, "Hey, computer is a bicycle for the mind," and I think of AI as a jetpack for the mind, right?
Yeah.
And it's just this, like, it's not, so if you're using it just for efficiency, I think you're underutilizing it. That I
Yes.
think is our big learning from observing folks who do it really great, versus folks who have AI access, who have Copilot, but they're using it still in kind of ways that are incremental.
Yeah. Think bigger. That's so important.
And I think, yeah, so the other thing that has happened is that these models have kind of become so much better. What used to take decades in terms of technology shifts is happening over months. So what you see is that, last year you couldn't do X, Y, and Z, and then this year you can. So the AI products themselves are becoming so much more powerful.
The number of times that we've had, we often joke, Grant and I, and some of our other coworkers about, I think we're about a year from this. I think we're about 2 years from here. And the number of times that has happened in less than 60 days from where we sat has just been, it's been amazing to watch. It's innovation at its fastest. Yeah.
it's an amazing time to be building products, because again, like, the one thing is that posture, I mean, as we are building these products and teams too, is that it's really important in all of this. For us at Microsoft, we're kind of really focused on, hey, how do we do it in a way that's secure, safe, and compliant? So that's really important. Build it on the foundation of trust. And second, do it where bring it to where you work, right? Intersect it with the workflows, intersect it with the data that is meaningful to you, versus some random web page in the web that could be useful, but way more important in terms of the signal of what you send to your boss, for example, in email.
Exactly. And it's just so much faster. I don't have to go to Google and look through 11 pages of answers that may or may not fully apply to what I'm doing. And I think that's huge, which kind of leads me to the next question. Microsoft has such access to such massive distribution, but the AI space has been really interesting in that we've had a number of really small, very nimble companies that have risen up pretty quickly. What is Microsoft's edge in the AI agent landscape?
Yeah, and I think I have a slightly different way of looking at this, which is, number one, I think, when the internet started, and, I've been through the internet and mobile and cloud shift, so full disclosure, is that, there were not one website or two websites, there were thousands of websites, right? So, I mean, once the ability to create apps, once that's democratized, that's, I think, one of the amazing, awesome things that's happening. That there are, just like AWS and like Azure and, kind of GCP did in terms of the cloud did for startups and companies. That's kind of what is happening here, which is with AI as democratizing the ability to build a product. So of course it's great to kind of see this Cambrian explosion of like all these apps and all these agents. Yes, and I think the way I think about where we stand, Microsoft, is most important for us is to say, is this actually, are we building AI products that accrue to the business value, right? From the vantage point that I look at it, which is AI at work, we're really looking at, hey, does this actually add to efficiency and effectiveness and empowerment in terms of individuals, teams, and organizations, right? So does that kind of, does it pass that lens? The second is, does it work where you work? Right? Again, like between the tools, but also just like over the work data, right? And the third thing I would say is making sure that this works in a safe, secure, responsible way. Because again, like, this is wild, wild west. On one hand, it is easy. The time to first demo has never been shorter, but the time to a safe, usable, responsible product still remains kind of that big step function. And that's where we are interested in.
It does. So beyond what's in today's release, is there anything else you're able to talk about, of course, that you are especially excited about that's happening at Build 2025?
I think we talked about it briefly, but to me, I think this idea of giving a digital assistant to every person at work that can answer questions, that can find information that you need, but and goes beyond and says helps you create information, helps you
Okay.
like get your projects done, and then taking all of that and saying how do you kind of make tailor that to the business that you run, you as a customer. I think that whole thing is kind of starting to come together, so I'm really excited about it.
Oh, wow. Just a couple more really quick ones here before we go, because I don't want to keep you too long. But what would you say developers or startups should be paying attention to in the AI tooling space at Microsoft right now? Any overlooked gems that you're surprised people haven't jumped on yet?
I think I'm seeing a lot of promise and traction here on the developer side on in a spectrum of these tools, right? So I see folks who are more, I would say, like hobby makers, kind of like slightly hands off, heavily using Copilot Studio, as we talked about, and really being able to put these Lego blocks together in a low code way and no code way. Like that's one thing. I would strongly encourage folks to look at the agent builders tools. The second is actually just getting deeper into Foundry itself and saying where you can kind of access a lot of the underlying tools that are required for building an AI agent. So if you think about it, the agents need to be able to call tools. They should be able to search the web. They should be
Yeah.
able to, browse the web, and they should be able to kind of like look up information within the enterprise and so on. So making sure that, again, with Foundry, what we are looking at is saying, can we do all of that hard work in terms of the infrastructure itself and allow you to tap into the kind of higher level macros here? Another good example that we have seen, in fact, building the products ourselves, which applies to a lot of the developers, is the way of product building has changed. So with
Yeah.
agents, it's not so much about building the UI and stuffing it and adding features. It's the model is the product.
Yeah.
And so how do you start to kind of build things in what I call a model forward way? A good example, right? So previously you would write like PRDs and feature specs, but now you say, okay, what are the prompt sets? The prompt sets are the new PRDs, right? And you say,
Yes.
these are the prompts for which you want you developer, you want your agent to work amazingly well.
Yeah.
And then have the evaluation loop that goes on. So these are all tools and building blocks that the Foundry effort has. And I'd encourage people to like really lean in and take advantage of them.
That's great. One last fun question before I let you go. If you are imagining Microsoft 365 5 years from now, what's something radically different that you hope will be true from today?
Again, do you have 5 hours? No,
I got all the hours you want.
no, no, this is, look, this is what, at least in my job, I think about a lot. There's a lot of stuff that is going today, but what's around the corner and how do we kind of, in fact, my email signature is the best way to predict the future is invent it. So in some sense, so instead of a prediction, I would say actually like an assertion I will make is there are three things that I believe will and should happen. Number one is, as I think about M365 and this like AI forward office, right? We'll start to think about these as every user today, we are still doers, and I think in the future we'll be directors, right? We are kind of directors of the AI, whether it being in writing something, whether it's in creating a content, whether it's in telling a story, whether it's in communicating with each other in a meeting and so on. From going from M365 in the future is going to enable us from going from doers to directors. That's my number one goal. Number two, I would say is I think there's a massive opportunity for us to, again, like think about how there's a 1 + 1 = 3 when it comes to agents and humans. So, and we have to design co-working experiences and collaborative experiences that are not, today you can comment on things, or you can, maybe like underline things and so on. But I want us to reimagine the entire idea of like co-working together with agents and humans in a way that puts us in the driver's seat, the people in the driver's seat. Right?
That makes so much sense. I love that you mentioned conductors, even because something that I've told writers when I talk to, because I've been in words for a lot of years now, and I keep saying, they're like, this doesn't feel like really writing. I said, stop thinking like looking at this the way you have in the past. You're not the musician in the orchestra now. You're the conductor. You're dealing with a number of tools that help you craft this final product. And I think there's still very much the you element involved.
Oh, completely. I think this, I like the way, like it's the kind of the orchestration. And so which is the third thing I'd say is I think with these tools, we'll have to make sure that there is a layer of trust and security and confidence that we provide, right? So that's the third part of it for me, which is one is going from doers to directors. How do we make the tools go there? Second is how do you work together? What's the reimagining of that? But the third, equally important is we're going to be in this new world. We're all kind of like relying on AI to kind of generate content, figure out, making decisions, helping us make decisions. So how do we have security and responsibility deep in the product, not as an afterthought? Right?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And Microsoft is, I would argue, uniquely positioned to handle that well. That's the advantage of being one of the big players, I would say, is this ability to, you've already had this trust with businesses, with their most important data and their everything over many years, I would say.
Yeah, and we want to earn it and re-earn it in the AI era and say, hey, with this is helpful and responsible and safe and secure AI. Like that's what we're going for.
That's awesome. Well, Aparna, thank you so much for joining us today at the Neuron. We really appreciate it and can't wait to see the rest of what comes out of Build and Copilot.
Thank you, Corey. And for those of you who are listening, watching, reading, really appreciate any of the feedback that's coming. And, it's an exciting time to be a builder.
Absolutely.